Gav, you've been in Wiluna for about a bit more than 24 hours. What's the sort of feeling you get from some of the other people you've talked to so far?
Just a feeling of hope. You know, if people care this much about the planet that they're prepared to come to a really remote little community like Wiluna, it really does give you a sense of hope for the future. That people do care, that people actually are concerned about the future of the planet, that they're prepared to do these sorts of actions and come and support other local communities and people in Wiluna. Like the old sort of saying, you know, think globally and act locally. So I think to me it's a great demonstration of hope.
So what is it that concerns you the most about the industry that we're looking at?
Well, first and foremost, for me, uranium mining contributes to the risk of nuclear weapons. The ongoing existence of nuclear power continues to enhance the risks of nuclear weapons. So in that sense, I've always felt that to me is the primal reason why we shouldn't be mining uranium. Next to that, you then look at nuclear power and the fact that we can find much better and safer alternatives for the future of the planet. So in that sense, I think there's a whole bunch of reasons why people should be opposing uranium mining and walking away from it.
Now, this camp's come together to traverse nearly 1,000 kilometres between Wiluna and Perth via Kalgoorlie. They'll be visiting a number of uranium mine sites along the way. What are the more local risks to the environment and communities along the way?
For the uranium mining that we know elsewhere around Australia and around the world, the main impacts relate to water, both the impacts on water resources from mine waste, whether that be tailings or waste rock, but also from where water's withdrawn from as well, where water's taken to be used in milling and processing and producing the uranium. So the other main issues include radon and all the radon decay products, and we know that can lead to significant exposures. And so if we look at the history of uranium mining, increased exposure to things like radon and radon decay products are one of the key reasons as to why you've got higher lung cancer rates in workers, for example. So in that sense, there's some of the more local risks. And then the global risk really become the use of the uranium.
And you've got a technical or a scientific background, and that's the perspective that you bring to bear on the issue. What kind of role do you think that scientists and technologists and engineers can play on this side of the debate?
Well, I think there's a whole range of ways that we engineers can get involved. One, we need to be more honest about some of the risks when they go wrong, because sometimes accidents can happen, as we've seen in Hungary recently, as we've seen in Japan recently, or even in the USA. So in that sense, we do need to be more honest with ourselves that sometimes technology and engineering isn't always perfect. But also, we can be honest and say, well, there are lots of technologies for the future, whether that's baseload solar thermal, smart grids, being efficient with the way we use our energy in the first place. So there's a whole range of things where engineering and scientists and other technology folks, we need to be active on the debate, and we need to be demonstrating what the good outcomes are and what's good for the planet versus what's good for the company.
And what do the mining companies think of you generally? Are you do they respect you or do they fear you? What's the feeling they get when you talk to them? Is it some of the mining bosses?
It's a good question. There's certainly some folks who don't know me or things like that often fear me, sort of thing. But there's a lot of folks who know me and know me well or know my work well. Often do have a lot of respect for the work I do. I don't make up my arguments. I don't go on hope. I don't go on blind faith. I go on evidence. I go on what the actual data says. And when you visited, like I have, almost every single uranium project in Australia, and seen the ongoing pollution legacies at every single one, ranging from sort of fairly local to severe and regional, then you can understand why I at least have a skepticism about some of the claims that the industry has. So in that sense, I think there's. Certainly I've earned my respect because the work I do is published in peer-reviewed journals and things like that. So yeah.
And let's try to compare Australia's regulatory regime compared to the rest of the world. Where do we fit in on that level?
Well, I think if you look at Australia, we certainly have state governments, including the territory in that sense, as well as federal regulation covering uranium mining. But in that sense, I think we're often told that uranium mining in Australia is world's best practice and it's the world's most regulated industry. And I often say it's still not good enough. If you look at the Ranger uranium mine this year, it was shut down for 5 months because it was coming so close to a catastrophic failure of its tailings dam that the only way they could avert that and minimise the risk of that was to shut down for 5 months. So if that's the best that the industry can do, then sorry, that's still not good enough. So in that sense, although the industry is certainly better regulated than elsewhere around the world, it's still not good enough, I think. And I think we've still got a long way to go, and it certainly doesn't inspire confidence in me as the first step in the overall nuclear fuel chain.
Yeah.
And when you talk about a catastrophic risk at Ranger Dam, what could be the result of that?
For Ranger, this year in late January 2011, Ranger shut down their mill because the water level in the tailings dam was starting to approach really critical levels. And so, depending on how much rainfall then fell in the rest of the wet season, would depend on whether the bathtub overflowed, sort of thing. So, they came within centimetres effectively of that, and they were really gambling on what the last remaining storms were for the remainder of the wet season. So in that sense, if it had have overflowed, you would have had quite saline water that's about twice as saline as normal seawater, very heavy metal rich, very radionuclide rich, and chemical rich as well. So that water would have flowed down through some of the wetlands and creek lines and straight into Kakadu National Park and the Ramsar listed wetlands that are not just of Australian significance, but they're accorded World Heritage status because they're that important. So in that sense, we could have had an incredible disaster that the likes of which Australia has not seen before. So for me, that's not the sort of gamble that I want to take. I don't think that's appropriate for any industry to take, whether it's uranium or others. So in that sense, they really came so close to going past the edge of the abyss. It's almost unforgivable.
I guess we went to Toro's centipede outcrop today. Considering they're about a couple of years away from production realistically, what are your thoughts on what you saw today and what you've heard?
Well, it only reinforced a lot of the thoughts and views that I've been expressing on a lot of the concrete deposits here. They're small, low grade, difficult projects to get going, and that to me not only screams technical risk, it also screams financial risk as well as environmental risk. Because if a company is so close to being profitable or making a loss, it means they're more likely to try and argue that, this is okay, we'll get around that. Or that if they do go bankrupt, then the state government will be left with the liability and the local community. So, and there's many examples of mine sites around that, around Australia where the governments have said, okay, well, just get going, and then once you get going, you build up the rehabilitation bond. They go bankrupt before that happens, and then the government's left with the clean-up costs. So, there's Mount Todd, there's Red Bank, there's Benambra, there's lots of mines around Australia in the last 20 years that have all had that problem. So, in that sense, that's one of my real fears for some of the proposed uranium projects around this area is that they're small, they're low-grade, difficult, and therefore very likely to prove problematic.